up, everybody? This is Ray. So today's the 7th of December, 2016, and I kind of started mumbling about how I would make a video discussing my theory on, or my speculation as to why the concept of a Plutonian, or the Plutonian kind of personality, or the themes that are associated with Plutonians, and those are people that are significantly influenced by the planet Pluto. More or less, they kind of emulate a lot of the Scorpio archetype. Why that kind of mentality, or that kind of aesthetics, or even just the themes that are associated with it, are becoming popular more or less in the mainstream. I can't say for sure personally that I have witnessed significant amounts of evidence to confirm or deny that there's some sort of trend going on with Plutonian-esque themes, but according to other Plutonians I know throughout social media, and also kind of just looking at the analytics for my YouTube channel, and some of the videos that I have mentioned things about Plutonians or Pluto in general, I seem to be getting more traffic as to views and stuff on those particular videos. But that wasn't a huge shock to me, because just like the Scorpio archetype and the zodiac sign, that one in particular seems to get a lot of inquiries because of how unknown, mysterious it is. But I can understand why people would also be interested in the Plutonian or the Scorpio archetype, because of its very obscure, mysterious kind of taboo associations. So when you look at trends throughout pop culture, you look at the demographic or the generation who control the overall trends from a marketing kind of demographic perspective. The market that advertises like new styles, clothes, releases of some sort of products or whatever, they're trying to target whatever the demographic between the ages of like 20 to 35-ish would want. So on a psychological, social psychology level, and part psychological, I guess, you would likely look back at things that were potentially influential in the 80s into the 90s. And the human mind is nostalgic, obviously. I mean, we all kind of feel nostalgia here and there with different things. And so things that were part of the immediate environment that the individual was exposed to early in life are going to be things that they're drawn to, either consciously or subconsciously. I think it's fascinating that now, the teens of the 2000 years, that particular group of age range, from mid-20s to mid-30s, were born in the 80s, and what different kinds of styles or trends were going on in the 80s. That is actually, arguably, depending on who you ask, I guess, but the majority of the subculture of the Gothic persuasion would agree that that is when the peak of it either began, and or that is where it all started from, the late 70s going into the 80s. So a lot of darker themed sort of things. Obviously, a lot of Goths are a fan of like Edgar Allan Poe and stuff, but obviously that's a lot older. So a lot of the modern aesthetics and trends, well, they weren't trends really per se with the mainstream, but the things that were considered cool and or being kind of, were kind of being exposed to the mainstream, like The Cure, that sort of thing, in the 80s, would be mirroring that. A lot of why those kinds of, interests or themes or whatever was popular is because that was when the Pluto Scorpio generation began. So it's almost like a double whammy kind of thing with the Pluto concept. So the Pluto is supposed to be your psyche, and it being in Scorpio, it just emphasizes the more doom and gloom, kind of embracing or accepting your darker side, and just more of like the paranormal, the spooky stuff, that sort of thing. So when we're looking again back at like the demographics for marketing and pop culture, the trends now in advertising and like the mainstream are going to now reflect what would catch the eyes of the target market in question, which would be the Pluto Scorpio generation. So it makes sense why Vampire Diaries, I don't even watch any TV, so forgive me, I'm going to butcher these. Some CSI thing that has that chick in a lab coat that has the black pigtails and she wears the spiked collar. I don't know anything other than that, except for I've had people ask me if I copy her, and I didn't know what it was until I mentioned it to somebody online, and they sent me a picture of it, and I was like, no. And, see, I'm horrible. I'm trying to think. I know that I've seen some references to a lot of goth or, contemporary goth kind of style or whatever starting to fuse itself into modern fashion. I kind of noticed that too because I'm starting to notice that there's more clothes like at normal, average Joe stores is what I would call them, mainstream stores, that I'd be willing to wear, and I'm like, oh my god. And then like not even too long ago I saw a skirt that was at Walmart of all places, and I'm like, oh my god, that looks like exactly like something I bought from Good Goth or Heavy Red or something like 5 years ago. And I was like, I'm mortified because now everybody's going to start looking like me. And then even at Halloween time, I noticed that a lot of, I think it's a shift in general just from the way that Halloween used to be. I think people are more serious about cosplay for actual, like, weird looking costumes, and they just want to be themselves dressed up as something different now. But half of the entire section for the ladies area in Halloween stores is just goth whatever, and I'm just like, oh my god. So obviously there is some mainstream pop culture influences that are targeting towards people that are within the Scorpio generation, Pluto Scorpio generation, but as a result, because of the way that everybody's influenced on a sociological level, this will start to become trendy and or phases and fashion, trends of some kind with everyone involved. So that's my theory on why a lot of goth-like or dark stuff, or what would be considered Plutonian themes, are now becoming popular. Now, a couple friends, I wouldn't even say a couple friends, one particular friend on Facebook and I we had a public discussion he put on his wall, and he's obviously a little bit more social than I am, I guess, or more willing to talk to other people. But I'm not saying I hate people, I'm just really selective. But he posted something about, why does everybody think it's cool to be a Plutonian? And then his entire commentary section started to go off about, I don't know. And then there's people like, it's so hard. And then they're like posting their charts to prove how plutonic they are. And I'm just like, I commented on that. I'm like, why do any of you think that this is cool? So if you don't know what a Plutonian is, or you're kind of unsure, or you like the goth stuff and you happen to be goth, I'm not saying that you are guaranteed to be a Plutonian if you're goth, but a lot of Plutonians are usually goth. But not every goth is for sure going to be a Plutonian. You know what I'm saying? So if you are of the goth persuasion and or you like that stuff, you're probably puzzled as to why I'm getting defensive and irritated with people thinking it's cool to insinuate that they're Plutonian. So now I'm going to reference a book that's one of my favorites called Healing Pluto Problems. So I believe this is Donna Cunningham is the author. Wiser, I think that might be the publisher. But anyway, so I'm not going to read an extensive amount of this because first off it's copyrighted, and secondly I want to respect her, her publication, but I am at least giving this a definite thumbs up. This should be, I think, even if you're not a Plutonian, I think having this book, especially if you ever decide you want to be an astrological council, you should have this book on your shelf. This book should be one of your first things you get, especially if you are a Plutonian or you have Plutonian signatures. And just in case you are unsure, I'm going to read the section in here that tells you for sure what are the astrological signatures of a Plutonian. But I'll read the back of this just to kind of do her a favor and, promote a book that I think everybody should give a shot with. So it says, don't read this book if you don't want to change. Very Plutonic, obviously, transformation. It is impossible to listen to what this author says about Pluto without looking into yourself, for the book demands that you reassess some part of your life as a result of reading it. Donna Cunningham provides basic information about the Plutonian archetype, explains how Pluto may function in a natal chart, and shows how Plutonian problems can manifest. Cunningham presents her material with the warmth and compassion, but without evasion, and puts her blunt finger right on the area that hurts. For the astrologer whose clients need help with Pluto issues, Cunningham addresses such topics as guilt, resentment, and fear, emotional secrets, and their contributions to self-isolation, incest, abuse, domestic violence, Pluto and the need for power and control, the psychology of being a victim, death and transformation, and the consequences of avoiding grief. Interested not only in diagnosing Pluto problems, Cunningham also gives us tools for healing those problems, affirmations, flower remedies, exercises for working with chakras, and shows us how to use Pluto transits for growth. Timely for astrologers and counselors, it is a holistic field. This is not a book to read once and put it aside. It is to be read over and over again, for the Pluto aspects will begin to activate consciously. So Donna Cunningham has a master's in social work from Columbia University and over 17 years of counseling experience working with abused children and women, alcoholics, and generally troubled people. Her experience shows in her practice common sense approach to difficulties highlighted in the horoscope and in her attention to social and cultural facets of psychological problems. She's also the author of Being a Lunar Type in the Solar World and an Astrological Guide to Self-Awareness. So I definitely recommend those books as well. I actually don't have them. I've skimmed through the Lunar Type in the Solar World because I should be reading that one. That's kind of about me. So anyway, I'm going to just skip to the second chapter about the Plutonian personality. I can kind of explain this myself, but as people who have seen my videos before might know, I don't always articulate myself as well as I'd like to, and she clearly, has written a sound book, so I'm just going to quote her. Alright, so the personality and character of a Plutonian. Let's state clearly that this is not a book about Scorpios, but about Pluto in all of us, how to understand it, and if Pluto is not working well for you, how to heal it. This chapter demonstrates the best and worst of the Plutonian, insights and healing tools presented for Plutonian types, because the Plutonian who has worked through the negative is in the best position to help the rest of us. Special attention and help is given to Plutonians here. So recognizing a Plutonian. First, it might be well to define what we mean by Pluto people. If you look at their charts, that is, if they let you look at their charts, I'm sorry, I'm going to laugh a little bit here, and obviously that's affirmation of me projecting my own self onto this. So if you hear laughing, it's because I'm likely guilty. It says, if they let you look at their charts, as secretive as they are, you would find Pluto aspecting the Sun, Moon, Ascendant, or Midheaven. Usually it is more than one of these, mostly in hard aspects like conjunction, semi-square, square, I can never say this one right, sesquistrate, S-E-S-Q-U-I-Q-U-A-D rate. Yeah, you know what I mean. Quincunx or opposition. Sometimes Pluto aspects a number of other planets, or the person has key placements in Scorpio, which Pluto rules. Having several planets in the 8th house can also produce similar effects. If you don't have the chart, or if you don't know that much about astrology, how would you recognize a negative Plutonian? There are certain personality traits that tend to go along with these chart patterns. Although not all will be present in a single individual, of course, if you are a Plutonian and some of these traits emphatically do not fit you, just let them go and take what is helpful of the descriptive personality. What will be given is a composite picture. Based on working with a great many Plutonians over the years, Plutonians who are negatively inclined are often very guarded and rigid, afraid to let others get close, never revealing much about themselves. Nonetheless, they know everything about you, having drawn it out of you in the guise of helping. Plutonians often look intense and have a mournful appearance that drives others away. Many are bitter and resentful, obsessing about the past, projecting their attitude. Look at what they've done to me. They are often mistrustful. If it wasn't for them, the t-shirts were designed that say, "The paranoids are out to get me." Or the others say, "I don't get mad, I get even." Or black t-shirts that say nothing at all, for Plutonians are often dressed in all black. Even their humor is black. How many Scorpios does it take to change a light bulb? None, because they'd rather sit in the dark. You see the emphasis on the Goth culture here. Alright. There are Plutonians who operate predominantly on the positive level, healing, transforming, transmutating themselves, and those around them, never content with superficial. They look deeply into life and people, have a natural gift for understanding what makes people tick. Some few are to the manner born through exposure to parents who were positive Plutonians. More often, however, the positive Plutonian comes to the ability to heal through the necessity of healing the effects of a difficult childhood or life circumstances. Many have survived extremely hard and traumatic backgrounds which might have crushed the lesser soul, but gave these resilient souls the strength of diamonds. Plutonians have a gift as well as a compulsion to find methods of dealing with painful events in their history, and thus will work on resolving the past. In short, many positive Plutonians began as negative Plutonians themselves, and work their way up through the persistent effort. Most of this chapter is devoted to understanding negative Plutonians, and the remainder of this book is tools to healing Plutonian difficulties that we all face. Plutonians are born counselors, so they tend to attract troubled people. However, Plutonians of the negative variety make themselves indispensable, subtly convincing you that you'd be helpless without them. You can't understand why you come to resent them, and you feel guilty since they do so much for you. Somehow the balance of power in the relationship has shifted so that you're doing things their way all the time and feel guilty if you don't. Women more often than men resort to this kind of manipulation in order to have power. Power and control are the underlying issues of planet Pluto, pure and simple. Since Pluto people are neither pure nor simple, however, their attempts to control come out as disguised ways, often disguised even from themselves at times. Control is achieved by such subtle means as manipulation, emotional blackmail, and helping, and guilt. Another characteristic of negative Plutonians is their way of dealing with emotions. Being in command of the emotions is to be in command of the situation, or so Plutonians reason. Feelings are seldom shown, especially those where control could be threatened. Anger, neediness, or vulnerability. Plutonians disclaim anger, yet inwardly seethe. I have a Uranus-Mars square, so I cannot even hide that. You are dead as far as... Okay, so... Where'd it go? You sense it and are bothered, but they insist that nothing is wrong. That in fact, it may be the only way that they know how to relate. How the Plutonian got that way. I'll go a little bit into this to this next page. So how the Plutonian got that way? I don't mean to imply that Plutonian people deliberately choose this painful pattern. It is helpful to remember that the defenses which cause such pain for these adults once made it possible for them to survive as children in a difficult and hostile environment. These children had to deal with abandonment, death, resentment, guilt, secret, sex, or revenge motif. Often they were traumatic betrayals of trust or threats to survival, bad family situations. As we will see in Chapter 5, a strong Pluto is common among children and alcoholics, abused children, and incest victims. Others might have lost a parent through death or bitter divorce, or they may have been children who suffered greatly at the hands of powerful adults. Often there is an overwhelming mother who misused her natural power over the child. being either overtly dominating or covertly manipulative. Sometimes one parent is harsh and punitive, while the other, seemingly weaker, is actually more controlling, and it's you and me against that monster, so you better stick close and do what I say. The good parent can actually wind up being more of a problem because anger against the domineering parent is clear-cut, and while the saint or martyr parent creates guilt and seemingly unmerited resentment. Often Plutonian children are unwanted. Although their parents may overcompensate and cover up by spoiling them, sometimes the parents have so many problems and are so enmeshed in power struggles with one another that the child is simply an added aggravation. Sometimes the pregnancy itself was no more than a ploy. This happens, for instance, in forced marriages, or when a marriage is just about to fall apart and the wife just coincidentally winds up pregnant at a critical moment. Such ploys are not especially successful these days, but even when the glue of the parents together's resentment is created, the child may bear the brunt of the parents' anger, especially if the child resembles the mate. Another situation which may create a Plutonian is grief in the family at an early age. A death may occur within a year before the child's birth, or sometimes within the year after. The household is in mourning, and the infant absorbs that grief as a part of the character structure. Such a child may have been conceived to replace the lost loved one. It seems almost an instinct beyond reason. Even I, who never wanted children, found myself crying over babies in the street while my mother was dying. And so then it goes on to, as we see in chapter 6, a bereaved person is angry, and that anger can be felt by an infant and taken as a personal message regarding self and the world. In addition, grief leaves an energy over to attend to life, so the infant's emotional needs may be resented, or not met at all, or met by fits and starts. Conversely, when the lost person is crucial to the mother, such as the parent or child, she may cling symbiotically to Plutonian children to make up for the loss. Also likely are one or more unresolved, deep-mourned deaths or losses. Plutonians seem to collect more than their fair share of deaths, and each new one may trigger remnants of old grief. As Dylan Thomas said, after the first death there is no other. Mourning may need to be completed in order to allow the Plutonian to let go of the melancholy state. Sometimes there is only the recurrent threat of loss or abandonment, a threat that damages the child as much as an actual loss. I am reminded of my short-term group about mothers and daughters, in which each of the 7 members had a Moon-Pluto aspect. I coincidentally was going through a Moon-Pluto transit. Intrigued, we probed to find out what each had in common. All the women had been continually threatened by their mothers as they were growing up. Either she would die or wouldn't be there when they got home from school. The group was short-lived because during our second meeting, the phone rang to tell me that my mother had died. This shocking confrontation with the thing that had been threatening them their whole lives was so traumatic that no one wanted to continue the group. I do suspect, however, that they needed to confront the reality of their mother's eventual death, and that was the true purpose of that group. So she actually believes that the transit going on at the time, and then them vicariously living through her experience of knowing that, was supposed to be therapeutic for them. So I'm not going to go on any further with this. You get the concept of what the Plutonian archetype is. This book is definitely worth it. Yeah. Also goes into how Plutonians are usually the ones that are like into the BDSM kind of things. If they are inflicting abuse, they're likely to act out or engage in those sorts of scenarios and role plays as therapy. So, but yeah, figured I'd just give people a taste of that. And if anybody has any other questions, I guess, about Plutonian archetypes, either my own personal reflection or if somebody wants me to reference anything else, feel free to hit me up. So again, this is Healing Pluto Problems by Donna Cunningham. And I think you can get it online. I think I got mine at NORWAC, the Northwestern Astrological Convention, which is in May, by the way. Anybody can go. It's in Seattle. Figured I'd just share.